Okay, fantastic. So thank you, Misty, for the introduction. I'm very excited to be here today virtually. It's a little hard to travel out to California for just a afternoon event. So thankfully, we got the good use of technology to help us here and be able to present to you. So I'm very excited to be here. So again, I'm Scott Dockum. I'm the USDA SBIR program coordinator. My job here at USDA is to manage the day-to-day operations of the SBIR program. So today I'm going to give you a little talk about the SBIR program in general, how it works across the federal government, and then I'm also going to talk at length about how we operate it here in USDA. And hopefully, see if there's any interest from folks there in your audience who would like to maybe submit an application to our program. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide here. So the history of the program, it was created by Roland Tibbetts at the National Science Foundation and was signed as a federal-wide program in 1982 by Ronald Reagan. To date, the SBIR program has awarded over $40 billion to research-intensive American small businesses. And it's often called the largest STEM talent concentration in the world. So that, there's over 450,000 engineers and scientists that are involved within this program. There's 11 federal agencies that participate annually in the program, and I'll go through who those are here in just a few seconds. But before we do that, on the slide it's up right now, since I can't see the audience, I'm guessing a lot of you have probably heard of these companies. Symantec is a company that came in very early as a small business, and they received a SBIR grant from Department of Defense and some others, I think NSF as well, to develop proprietary technologies for protecting computers. And as you know, you can actually buy their product now at any Best Buy or any stores online as a way to protect your computer from malware and issues like that. Qualcomm is another company you probably all have heard of. They actually came in and were looking to develop chips, computerized chips that can go into small devices. And so if you are the owner of an iPhone or a Android phone or any type of mobile device that uses those type of technologies, their chips are in there, and that's how they got their started doing this, was through an SBIR grant. So you can see how they've grown into a very large company. iRobot, everybody knows about them because they're the company that has the vacuum cleaner that'll go around in your house and clean up after you, which is kind of cool from my perspective. I like this. I'd like that. But iRobot originally came in as a small business to the SBIR program, and they received a grant or a contract actually from Department of Defense to develop robots to help our warfighters, help the soldiers, so there was less casualties in times of war or during exercises that they might be working on. So, that's an example of how they've modified a technology for Department of Defense, and now they've turned it into a consumer product that a lot of people enjoy using. Up on the top right, a lot of you maybe have had LASIK. I have had that procedure done myself. That was a technology that was also funded under SBIR through the NIH program. So a company came in and said, hey, we think we know how we can modify the cornea of the eye, and we'd like to see if we can do that. And so they received funding to develop that. So the last company there, in Chroma, is kind of a cool one. They're new to the game, and they've received over $20 million in sales because they've developed a pair of eyeglasses that you can put on, and if you're colorblind, when you put the glasses on, you can actually see in color. And they've got some really cool videos. If you ever go onto YouTube, you can check out their videos, and you can actually see real-world people experiencing color for the very first time. It's very moving, very cool technology, very cool project. So just wanted to give you kind of a flair of some cool technologies that started with the program early on, and some that are just getting started but doing some really cool things. So the overview of the SBIR program, the original goal was to meet the federal research and development needs. Every agency that has an SBIR program has a specific mission. So, USDA falls in that category. We have a mission to support agriculture and rural communities. Department of Defense, same thing. They need to support their war fighters, the people that are out there, serving that defense mission. So they wanted to increase the private sector commercialization of innovations that are derived from federal research and development funding to help support those missions. And also they wanted to see technological innovations being developed rather than just always relying on old technology. So that's kind of why the program came into existence. And they also wanted to see additional participation in the development of these innovations and entrepreneurship by socially and economically disadvantaged persons. So you'll hear a lot of talk within the program about, we really want to see women-owned companies come in or minority-owned companies come into the program. So the way SBIR works, and there's a sister program called STTR, and I'll kind of go through each of those. So the Small Business Innovation Research Program, or SBIR, is a set-aside program. So basically Congress each year will provide an annual appropriation of extramural R&D funding to each of the federal agencies that have over $100 million of those funds provided to them each year. As a requirement under the law, 3.2% of those funds has to be set aside for an SBIR program. Under the STTR program, or the Small Business Technology Transfer Program, same idea, except for it's only for agencies that receive over $1 billion in extramural research funding from Congress. They have to have an STTR program, and they have to put aside 0.4% of that budget for that program. So there's some agencies, such as USDA, we actually don't receive $1 billion. We're in still the million. So we do not have an STTR program, and I'll show you that in a minute on which agencies have the SBIR and which ones have both programs, which is both SBIR and STTR. The other aspect of the program is it's a phased program. So there's a phase 1 and a phase 2 and a phase 3. So phase 1 typically is the development of a prototype or a feasibility study to determine if the innovation that you're developing is feasible, and also to kind of determine if it has a market. So you apply for a very small amount of funding, typically anywhere up to $150,000, and for 6 months to determine that feasibility. If that's successful, then companies come and reapply for additional funding under phase 2, and they can get up to $1 million for 2 years. Depending on the agency, those numbers will fluctuate and change, and you'll see that as I go through our presentation. But they get 2 years to actually start the process of fully developing the technology or the innovation and getting it ready for the commercial market. And then phase 3 is where you actually move it into a commercial market. We do not provide, the federal government does not provide any SBIR funding for that. This is where you actually secure financing, or you have your customer base that's already ready to start procuring or buying the technology or the innovation, or you could secure contracts through the federal government and or other sources, but it's non-SBIR funding for those contracts. So here are the agencies that participate in the program. Those that have an asterisk also have an STTR program. So you'll see Department of Defense, National Institute of Health, Department of Energy, National Science Foundation, the best agency of all, which is USDA. I'm not biased or anything on that. And then we have EPA and NASA. And then we also have Department of Homeland Security, Department of Transportation, Department of Education, National Institute of Standards and Technology, and we also have NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. In reality, they're all excellent agencies. They all run very good programs. And so what we're going to do now is transition the topic here, and I'm going to talk more in depth about the USDA SBIR program. So the features of our program, we operate in a little different fashion, and the reason for this is because you'll see in the next slide, we're a grant agency. And one of the things we like to do is we provide an RFA or a solicitation that will come out, and we basically have some general areas of research that we're looking to see if there's a commercial market for. And the ideas are typically going to be investigator initiated. So what I mean by that is that we know that there are folks out there on the ground, out in the fields. They know what the issues are related to the problem that they're dealing with in the ag space or a rural community space. They're going to come to us and say, hey, we've got an idea on how we can fix this problem, and we think it fits well under your program. So that's why it's an investigator-initiated type of program. The awards that we make are based on scientific and technical merit. We also are going to look at the PI, the company qualifications, and we want to see what that commercial potential is for the innovation. And then we also encourage subcontracting to universities as well as USDA labs. We see an awful lot of our companies do this. I would say over 50% of our companies have some kind of a arrangement with a university or a USDA lab of some kind. We are one of the smaller agencies when it comes to budgets. If there's some pie charts that are floating around out there in the interwebs, you can look it up, and you'll see like Department of Defense, Department of Energy, National Institute of Health, NSF are the huge agencies that have huge extramural R&D budgets from Congress. USDA's is not as high. So our annual budget for the SBIR program is around $22 million per year. Now it goes up and it comes down. So that's just kind of an average of where we're at. What we do is we have obviously our phase 1 grants, but we do them for 8 months. And the reason for that is because there's growing cycles typically associated with agriculture. So we've increased that time by a little bit. And companies can always get more time if they need on a grant through a no-cost extension. But we provide $100,000 for that first phase 1 just to determine that feasibility study. And then phase 2 is a 2-year grant at $600,000. The last bullet there kind of shows some statistics. So in FY17, we had 525 phase 1 applications submitted that were reviewed through our peer review process. Of those, we funded 88. So it equates to about a 14 to 15% success rate for phase 1. And then for phase 2, we had 57 projects submitted and we funded 26. So it's roughly about a 50% success rate. Now you can only get a phase 2 grant if you've had a prior phase 1. You can't go straight to phase 2. So that's why the success rate's a little bit higher at phase 2, because we're pulling from a pool of companies that have already had phase 1 grants from us. So we have 10 different topic areas within our program. I'll kind of go over these a little bit in detail here. We have our conservation of natural resources. We used to call that the air, water, and soil topic area. And the goal here is that, agriculture causes a lot of problems in all 3 of those mediums. And we're trying to see how we can actually conserve those mediums without causing additional harm. So we see a lot of air pollution technologies trying to mitigate air pollution come into this program. We also see a lot of water conservation technologies and soil conservation technologies. There's a lot of erosion issues that seem to come about in the ag space. So we're seeing a lot of erosion technologies starting to show up to limit that issue. Animal production and protection is really our veterinary science topic area, and the goal here is to work to keep the animals healthy, keep their well-being, while getting them ready also to ultimately end up in the marketplace. A lot of those are going to ultimately be sold and put into the grocery store chains, so you want to keep them healthy and viable as they're getting ready for that. The other thing we see a lot of in this topic area is new development of vaccines, ways to prevent diseases with animals, and also ways to kind of look at infrastructure on how to support animals as well. The aquaculture topic area is a very interesting one. Majority of the fish that you buy today, typically is farm raised, and it's a very labor-intensive process and a lot of energy issues that go into that. It takes a lot of energy to run those systems that keep those fish healthy. So we're always looking for ways to increase efficiency, reduce energy costs for aquaculture production, but also looking at different types of fish that the consumer may want to purchase, and or how to keep those fish healthy. So we see kind of a wide variety of things come through there. The biofuels and bio-based products topic area is really focused on getting ourselves away from petroleum-based products. So you'll see a lot of, particularly in the bio-based area, a lot of plastics that are made out of different types of ag materials or feedstocks. We see different kinds of like greases that can be used in mechanized equipment, to grease up, the gears of a machine, but it's non-petroleum based. We also see a lot of things that the consumer might want, which could be something as simple as a new kind of makeup that you can purchase at, Macy's or JCPenney or whichever store you can find it at. And then on the biofuel side, we're also trying to get away from, gasoline, the typical petroleum products that you see there. Food science and nutrition is one of our bigger topic areas. There's a lot that can come under here. It really focuses on the production, the processing of food, the packaging of food, the food security issues that come with it. We also see companies developing new food products, new types of foods that, like new sources of protein, things like that. And there's also an education part to this topic area where you can we funded projects that dealt with like childhood diabetes or obesity issues. How do you educate the population on eating better? Forest and related resources is really about maintaining our forests and trying to keep them healthy. So we see technologies coming in here that deal with wildfire issues, which is a big problem I know out in your state. And so we see a lot of technologies also dealing with infestations of bugs. There's the pine bark beetle, which I'm sure a lot of you may have seen that out west too. We've got technologies that are working to actually alleviate that problem pest. And then we also see technologies where people are going in and actually pulling out wood, dead wood, or wood that can be used and made into a value-added product that a consumer might buy. So pretty cool things that are coming out of there. Plant production and protection engineering, and then its sister program, biology. What those focus on is specifically on plants and the production and harvesting of them. Under the engineering side, more focused on robotics. How do you actually harvest the crops and process them in the field, move them into where they can start to be processed and packaged. We also see a lot of technologies related to drones, how to monitor the crops, make sure that things are growing the way you want them to, using software. Precision ag is a common word we use under that topic. Plant production and protection biology is about manipulating the plant itself, the crop itself through genetic engineering, or just trying to get it to either be resistant to pathogens or viruses, and or maybe developing a new type of crop that a consumer might want, like maybe a new type of tomato as an example. We also deal with disease-resistant issues as well as pollinator issues, so making sure we have plenty of bees that are helping support those. The last two on the slide there, these are kind of different. When you talk to SBIR agencies that run their programs, they're always going to tell you, you can only submit to us a brand new innovation. It can't be something that's already been done or tried. We are different. We're the only agency within the entire federal government that will allow you to use an off-the-shelf technology that's already been developed if it can support small and mid-sized farmers and or support rural communities. What I mean by that is that under like the rural community and development topic area, we will often have companies that have developed medical devices or broadband devices that were used mainly in an urban environment, maybe a large city. They tweak that technology just a bit so that it can actually be used in a rural community. So maybe helping elderly that live in a rural community stay in their home longer by using that medical device, or getting internet service, or getting cell service out to those rural communities. Those are things that we can fund. Small and mid-sized farms, again, we're trying to help small and mid-sized farmers maintain profits and be efficient. So we see a lot of energy efficiency technologies that are often applied to the small and mid-sized farms topic area to help them increase their profits and stay in business. A lot of our farms are being bought out by large firms, and so we want to see these small and mid-sized farms continue to thrive. Okay,
hey,
so that's it. Yeah, go ahead.
We have a question.
Sure.
Where would a food safety proposal fit within these topic areas?
Well, it kind of depends on what you're looking at. So a food safety proposal would most likely be under the food science and nutrition topic area, but it could also be under the plant production and protection biology, and or maybe even the engineering topic area. It just kind of depends on what you're working on. And so I'll talk a little bit in depth about how when you come and you look at our solicitation, you want to go through each of the topic areas in depth. And there's the name of the national program leader that runs that topic area. You want to contact them directly. They're the ones that run the scientific portfolio, and they can help guide you as to whether your project is a fit for the program or not.
Great, thanks, Scott.
Yep. So I've kind of talked, at length about how we have each of the 10 topic areas. Here is just a real overview of different things we've funded in the program. I won't go through all of these, but you can see we're not just about chickens and cows, which I think a lot of people equate USDA to be. A lot of the companies that we are starting to see come to us now originally focused on NSF or Department of Defense funding or DOE funding, and they realize, wait a minute, there is a place for my technology at USDA. And so that's why it's kind of important to know what we can support within the program itself. Okay, switching gears just a little bit, I want to talk about how the review process works, so folks are kind of aware of that. So the first thing is that when we receive a proposal from any company, what we'll do is we'll put it through a confidential peer review process. And so it's a panel process. We typically use folks from academia, industry, nonprofits, and federal labs. All of these folks come in, they sign a non-disclosure agreement, so we ensure that your information is protected. And we conduct a panel both at phase 1 and phase 2. Now, we also will use ad hoc reviewers as necessary. And what that means is the panel itself may not have the very specific expertise that the company is proposing on. So we'll go outside and find some very specific expertise to help augment, get some more additional comments to augment the panel discussions if we need to. After we receive review all the applications or the proposals, the applicant will receive verbatim copies of the review. So we're going to tell you what the panel said, what the individual reviewers said. The only thing we don't do is tell you who they are, because we do keep it as an anonymous peer review. Phase 1 applicants that were not selected for funding, you can reapply again under their next solicitation cycle. We see a lot of that happen, and because you've received comments on your prior proposal, chances are you're going to understand how to beef that proposal or strengthen that proposal up so that it can be resubmitted. Doesn't guarantee that you'll get selected the second time, but it definitely does help your chances to do that. And then for phase 2, you can only apply one time to the program to get phase 2 funding. So you want to make sure that you have all your work done under phase 1 before you plan to apply for phase 2, because you only get one shot at doing that. So talk a little bit about university involvement. I think a lot of people I think that are there today are kind of in this arena, and I wanted to kind of spend some time here. we strongly encourage involvement by USDA, by government scientists and or university scientists on all of our projects. It's really a good thing. We like to see that, but there always seems to be some confusion on what can the university person actually do on the grant. And so I want to make sure that I go through this in some detail. So the university scientist can serve as a consultant on a grant or receive a subcontract on one of these grants, as long as they continue to work full-time at their home institution. So if you're a professor at UC Riverside and you want to participate in a grant, really the best way is to serve as a consultant or a subcontract. And it's limited to no more than a third. So only a third of the grant can go to the university under the subcontract or as to a consultant under phase 1. Phase 2 you can have up to 50%. If you want to be the principal investigator, so you want to be the lead person on the grant, on the project, then in order to do that, you have to reduce your employment at the university to less than 50%. So 49% is what you need to achieve there. And that has to be for the duration of the grant. And so you want to make sure that you got that kind of figured out, because we run into a lot of issues where university professors, they don't want to reduce their employment because they're concerned about losing fringe benefits, tenure tracks, that kind of stuff. So there's other things we can do. There's other ways to get around that. And I would go back to that second bullet, and that if you have a company but you don't want to reduce your employment at the university, you should hire somebody else to serve as the lead PI and be the lead on the project under the company and show that they're fully employed by the company. And then you would serve as a consultant or a subcontract on it. And then the other thing that we don't want to see is that all the research is performed at the research lab for the professor or the school. There has to be some research that's done at the company itself. When Congress initiated the program, a lot of money back in the early 80s was going straight to all the universities. And so they didn't want to see that continue under this program, which is why they've put these restrictions in place. They want to make sure that the money is going to the small business, and it's the small business that's utilizing the funding, not the universities. So keep these things in mind as you're thinking about moving forward with this program. It's usually not acceptable for a university or government scientist to serve as the consultant and have all the research done in their lab. So I think I kind of covered that. And then another thing you can also do, which is pretty cool, is to develop a CRADA, which is a cooperative research and development agreement, or secure a license from one of our USDA labs. And the point there is that USDA develops a lot of technologies in-house, and those technologies often are ready and prime for a commercial market. The small business can actually come in and license that technology. They do pay royalties back to USDA, but often they're very small royalties, and so they got a chance then that they can get some SBIR funding and move that technology forward into a commercial market. The CRADA allows you to collaborate with a USDA researcher and use their lab facilities for some of the work. But again, the 1/3 rule still applies under that agreement, so you have to keep these things in mind as you're moving forward. Okay, some advice if you plan to submit an application to us. As I mentioned earlier, and I didn't really put it here on the bullets, but please ensure that you contact our staff, the national program leader that runs the program, the topic area you're interested in. Please contact them and ask them, does my project fit in your topic area? Last thing you want to do is spend all this time and effort working on a proposal or an application, and it's basically not a good fit, and we'll probably review it, but it wouldn't get a real good review and wouldn't get funded. So make sure you do that. All their contact information is found in our solicitation. You can contact them directly. The other thing is you want to ensure that you provide a good vision of where you want to be at the end of a phase two. It's that forward thinking that you got to do. So what is the market opportunity? How's this technology going to be a game changer in that market in the future? You want to focus on those enabling factors that could, cause problems with the research and show how you're going to overcome those. Sell the importance of your project, and the way to do that is to make sure that you have good letters of support from end users, consumers, investors, people that are actually going to buy that innovation or use that innovation or invest in it at the end. And that kind of ties into the last bullet, which is showing that connectivity with the communities you're intending to serve. The other thing that we have a lot of problems with is companies don't provide a good detailed experimental plan, and they also forget to, well, they either forget or they don't want to include proprietary information. So again, our peer reviewers all sign non-disclosure agreements. We're not here to steal the intellectual property or that information. So when companies provide us with that, they quite honestly get very good reviews versus companies that give us very little information. So you want to, don't be shy on that. Make sure you provide that to us. Factors that improve chances for commercial success. So, we want to see high scientific, high technical merit, and high commercial potential. And if you look at our new solicitation that just came out on Monday, you'll see that we're asking for market opportunity information in there, and we're giving you some additional pages to ensure that you provide that to us. Want to see good consultants. We want to see CRADA opportunities if they're there. Good business expertise, strong letters of support from phase 3 partners, end users, consumers, and investors. Clear understanding of what's your entry and how you're going to sustain this innovation in the market. And then also participate in our phase 1 and phase 2 commercialization assistance programs. These programs we provide to our companies free of charge, and the goal here is to use these companies as a way to help support our companies that we're funding in both phase 1 and phase 2. So phase 1, we help develop what's called a commercialization plan, which is part of your phase 2 submission. And then in phase 2, you work with our contractor for 18 months to develop a commercialization strategy. You also gain access to a network of ag-focused point of contacts. It could be anybody from consumers to investors to other researchers. It really opens up doors to make sure that you know where you're going with the technology. And then I talked already a little bit about forming a CRADA and a license with USDA. And the reason why I throw this slide in is that we use those as kind of a tie-breaking opportunity. So if you have a CRADA or you're licensing a technology from a USDA lab, if your proposal or your application is essentially tied with another application where they don't have a CRADA or a license, it serves as a tiebreaker. So that's pretty cool to be able to help with that. So let's talk a little bit about our timeline. As I mentioned just a minute ago, on Monday we released the RFA. We call them requests for applications. So if you go to our website, you can access that. Page 6 is where you can start to see where all the different topic areas are and find the contact information for our national program leaders. And the deadline for proposals will be October the 25th. We will convene our panels for those proposals generally in January and February, and we'll typically notify probably towards the end of March whether companies have been selected for funding or not. And then we'll award the projects probably starting in late June through August, depending on budget situation. We had this last year, Congress passed the budget fairly late, so it delayed our start dates for all of our projects. So that's why we kind of give a range there. For phase 2, again, there is no straight to phase 2 program. You have to be a prior phase 1. We released that solicitation in December. And those proposals are typically going to be due in February, and we'll notify folks in June and make those awards in September. All right, so that's the nuts and bolts of the program. Now what I get to do is provide you with some fun stuff. I'm going to give you some examples of some projects we have funded under the program. We've got, over 400 and some projects that we have got information on, so these are just a few of those, but these are some of the fun ones for me, and I always like to present them. So the first one here is called Funes Farm, Inc. They got a grant from us to develop what they call a cow pot. And the gentleman you see up at the top holding the planter, that is actually a planter that's made out of cow manure. He's a dairy farmer up in Connecticut, and he had a large problem with manure on his farm because he's got hundreds and hundreds of cows. So he was actually shipping manure to a landfill, and he needed to come up with a better way to deal with it. So he worked with a Connecticut researcher at University of Connecticut, and they figured out if you dry the manure down, you can fold it into kind of this pot. And you put your dirt, you put your seeds in it, you start growing the plant, you go out, you dig your hole, you throw the whole thing in the ground, you've got your fertilizer, everything's good to go, the plant's happy. And so he's now selling this on Amazon.com. You can buy it on greenhousemegastore.com, as well as their own website. Doing quite well, and it's a sustainable product that he can continue to make as long as he's still in the dairy business. Dirty Jobs came out and did a TV show with him, and he's also received awards from the U.S. Dairy Sustainability Award. So pretty cool project for us, and we're very happy about it. The next one we have there is Ecovative. These guys came to us and said, hey, there's a lot of agricultural waste that's being produced across the United States. We think we can actually take it, and by using a fungal mycelium, which would act as a glue, we can take that agricultural waste and turn it into what's called a mushroom material. It's actually like foam, styrofoam. And they can use it for all kinds of different things. One of the things that they are using this for is for packaging materials. They have a contract with Dell computers. Their very large servers are actually packaged with this particular material. It's biodegradable. You don't have to worry about putting it in the landfill, and it's really neat. They had some negotiations going with IKEA to actually use it in some of their packaging for their furniture. And they're also looking at just simple things. So if you go down to a flower shop, they always have that kind of green foamy stuff there that they put the stems of the plants in so they can make those really pretty bouquets. They were working with us under one of our grants to develop the foam to actually be able to support bouquets of flowers under that particular industry. So it's kind of a really cool project, something you would have never have thought about, but we like it. Alterus Energies is another cool project. This is something you would not think USDA would fund. This is something you think the Department of Energy would fund. So the problem is there's a lot of rural communities out there that are really focused on using diesel generators to power, use that for powering their electrical needs. These guys came down from MIT and they said, hey, we got this idea for what's called a buoyant airborne turbine, or a BAT. And if you look at the picture on the top right, you'll see it's like a large helium-filled donut, and in the middle of that is a wind turbine. And what they do is they bring this all folded up on a flatbed truck, and they blow it up with helium, and then they raise it up several thousand feet into the air where there's a constant wind speed. They can go higher than a typical windmill, typical towers, and they tether it with a cable, and the turbine spins, and they're able to generate electricity and use that electricity in rural environments that normally wouldn't be able to do this. What's cool about this technology is that, they came in saying we're going to use it for energy uses, but they tweaked the technology and are now getting all kinds of investment, particularly overseas, to attach cell phone antennas to the BAT, use the turbine itself to actually power the cell phone antennas, and now they're able to provide cell phone service to areas that normally couldn't have it. So it's really kind of a cool technology, and it's something that's progressed over time into a new type of thing, a new type of innovation. The last one I'm going to talk about here is Stony Creek Colors. This company came to us and said, you know, if you wear blue jeans or you wear blue shirts or any kind of fabric that has blue in it, those textiles are typically dyed with very hazardous chemicals. They're very toxic to the environment. They're just not good to have. And they said, you know, we've got a way where we can take indigo, which is a natural plant, and we can extract the dye from indigo and process it so that it can be absorbed by the textile, you know, by the fabric, and ultimately could be sold to the consumer with blue jeans and things like that. So they came to us with a whole system, basically they call it seed to closet approach, where they would actually, you know, develop it at the farmer level. They got a conglomerate of farmers to actually start growing the indigo as a new crop, and then Stony Creek Colors was able to do the innovation to, you know, harvest the crop and pull the dyes out, sent the dyes to the mills, and then the brands, the companies that actually make the fabric or make the blue jeans, are buying those bio-based dyes and putting them into their products, which are then being sold to the consumers, and the whole process just keeps, you know, going around and around. They've got companies like Lee Jeans. There's a couple of Levi's has talked with them, and a couple of other large manufacturers to actually start using this product. I think Lee Jeans is already doing it. And they've also received several awards for this technology, and it's really cool. So this is Sarah Bellos. She's the owner of the company up there on the top right. So with that, this is my contact information. You're always free to contact us at any time. We don't have like a closing period or a blackout period like some other agencies might. Our doors are open, as they say, anytime for you to call us and talk to us about the program. And if you have any questions or you want to make sure, you know, your project fits, feel free to contact our staff. So with that, Misty, I'll turn it over to you and see if there's any additional questions.
Sure. I'll start with one question that I get a lot. So, and you mentioned that the average phase one of the 100K that USDA gives out, generally people apply for 150K. What if they want to apply for more? What if they think they might need more funds for the program? Is there a cap? What's the recommendation there?
Yeah, so the law says that the federal agencies can award no more than 150K to a phase one. However, the law also says that the agency can determine the cap that they want to put on the award. So if you take a look at you know, our program, we cap it at 100K. So if you come in at over that, if you provide us a proposal and you say, okay, we're asking for 125, we're not going to review it because you came in over the budget that we put in there. And we're very clear about that in the solicitation, that you can't exceed the 100K. Other agencies are also have smaller amounts too. You know, some of the smaller agencies, they're also around 100K as well. Really, to be honest with you, the reason for this, it's all based on budgets. You know, with a $22 million program, we want to try to see if we can fund as many projects as possible and get those into the pipeline for hopefully funding for phase two later on. If we raise our ceiling up, or you know, that just limits the number of applications we can fund. So our success rate would obviously go down. Unless something happens and we start getting more funding, then maybe we can reevaluate at that point in time. But that's the reason why we cap it at 100K.
Great, thanks. Any other questions? Brian?
So you said that you can only apply for phase two if you get a phase one award. Two questions. when can you apply for phase two? So if it's 3 years later, can you apply for phase two? And the second part of the question is, if you get a phase one award from another agency and it has USDA applications, could you apply to a phase two with USDA because you got a phase one from a different agency?
Okay, I heard that. Okay, so to answer the first part, if you get a phase one grant and it's successful, you aren't obligated to apply for phase two at your first opportunity. You can actually apply for phase two later in the future. We run a phase two solicitation every year. So we actually have, I would say, a good chunk of our companies wait and apply maybe the second time, the second year after the phase one has ended. I have one company that we funded. It was last year as a phase. They got their first phase two, but they waited 7 years before they applied for it. They were still eligible to apply because they never had applied for phase two before that. So we don't have any specific timelines or caps on how long you can wait. The point there is to put your best foot forward. You want to make sure that you are primed and ready to go for that phase two. And if it requires you to take some additional time to get more data, get things more in line, more power to you. We're more than happy to allow for that. The second question was, if I heard it correctly, was that if you have a phase one grant, let's say at another agency, I'll just use Department of Defense, we'll use Navy as an example, and you see applicability of that technology that was funded under the Navy grant to use it as a phase two under USDA, can you do that? And the answer to that is yes, you can. The statute or the law says that you can switch between agencies, but in order to do that, there's going to be some additional work on your end. You want to make sure you contact the agency that you want to switch to, and talk with them specifically about the process and how you want to do that. And the reason why I say that is we've had companies that have done this, and they had the mentality of Navy, right? The Department of Defense type of way of doing business, the way they have their applications submitted to them. They have specific formats for their application. And so we do business differently. And so when the application showed up, it looked like a Department of Defense application, not necessarily a USDA one. And it was because they neglected to really figure out how we operate and what our business model is. And so they didn't fare very well. And again, you only get one chance to submit for phase two, even if you're switching from one agency to another. So that was kind of unfortunate. So make sure that you do talk with folks and understand those things beforehand. We've also have highly recommended to other companies who have wanted to switch that they hold off and not submit at the first chance that they could for a USDA. Maybe wait a little bit and make sure that they have a USDA type focus proposal ready to go. And that's done pretty well. But yes, you can definitely do that.
Okay, so how many letters of support do applications typically have, and what sorts of letter writers carry the most weight from USDA's perspective? Okay,
so we require a couple things. If you read the new RFA that just came out, you're going to see that we highly encourage letters of support. We ask that they be 2 pages in length. They have to come from somebody that on their company letterhead, and they sign it. So we're trying to get away from potential waste, fraud, and abuse issues where people are forging letters. And there has to be contact information as well, so we can go back to that person and verify, yes, this is a true letter of support. I would say as far as the number of letters we get, it really varies. We have some companies that'll give us a whole bunch, and we have others that give us very little. The point here is that you want to ensure that those letters of support are clearly describing how you're making your case as far as this innovation and how it's going to progress into a market opportunity. there's another aspect to this as well. Is sometimes companies won't give us a letter of support, and they do that because of business concerns. And what they will do is they'll write us a letter, and this is in the RFA too, it says this as well. If you choose not to give us a letter of support, please explain why. And a lot of times a company will have a very disruptive technology to an industry or a sector. And if they start to showcase that early on, it can be detrimental to their success. And so they may not want to start seeking those types of investment opportunities and or consumers right up front until they can get some of that real understanding completed. So we're going to ask for that as well. But letters of support that we do not like to see are things like letters of support from congressmen or state and local representatives. They do nothing for the proposal, and so it's not worth the time to go after that. We do also want to see letters of support if you want from collaborators, particularly if there's somebody that's going to be providing you with a facility or access to a facility or equipment that you're going to need. We want to see that too, so there's validation that you actually have the ability to conduct the grant as you state in the proposal.
Okay, another question. Any specific formatting advice for the USDA application?
Yes. The advice I can give you is you need to read the RFA because we provide all the formatting requirements in that.
Okay. Also, is there a electronic repository of CRADAs if people wanted to look up to see what kind of CRADAs have been signed with the USDA?
As far as the CRADAs goes, I mean, we do publish what CRADAs have been developed between a private entity and the USDA. What you can do is go to the Agricultural Research Service, or ARS, website and go to their technology transfer portion of that web page, and that's where they list out all the information on their CRADAs. I think the other part to that question, which wasn't asked but is important to note, is what licenses are available. What innovations has USDA created that's ready for a license agreement? That's really a key aspect to that website as well, because you can go and cruise through that and see what licensed technologies are prime and ready to be licensed, and see if there's any opportunity there as well.
Brian?
Scott, on following up on the license topic, many of these companies will be licensing either from a university or USDA. At what stage does that licensing process need to be at when they apply for SBIR? Do they actually have to have the license in hand? Can they get a letter of support to say that they would grant a license or an option for a license? What makes it the best?
The best is if you've got a letter that basically says that the license has been granted to the company and that the purpose of the SBIR is to continue to move that innovation forward. So, it's a technology transfer mechanism. We have funded companies that have come forward with letters that say, we have a license agreement that's it's in negotiation, and or we're working on trying to get that finalized. That's a pretty good, strong letter, as long as it's kind of saying that there's an endpoint. The ones that don't do too well is that they say, okay, we just started a negotiation. We don't know, we basically don't know if we're going to get a license agreement in place or not. Those letters of support tend to not fare very well. So you want to kind of be, somewhere within that end stage game if you can. That's typically what we see as coming through the program with the most support.
We have one more question.
Yeah, so first off, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. So maybe it wasn't clear to me from the presentation, but can startups actually apply for SBIR? And if so, what stage do they have to be in order to have the greatest chances of actually getting a successful phase 1 application?
Yeah, so startups can apply. We've got companies that we have funded that are less than a year old. And I would say typically a majority of our companies average anywhere between 2 to 9 employees. So it's not like these large firms that have 400 employees. I would say a majority of our companies are in the 2 to 9 range. So yeah, you can be a brand new startup. One of the things that'll have to happen though is that when you get ready to apply for a grant, you have to go through grants.gov, and that's how you submit an application to us. And there's a registration process that's involved there. That registration process can take up to 6 weeks to complete. And so you want to start early and get that done. And then part of that registration process is registering with sam.gov, which is going to verify that you are actually a business. You're an entity that can conduct business within the United States. You also have to have a DUNS number and a tax ID number. So we often get people that'll call us up and say, I just got laid off from my job and I don't have a business in place. I just want to apply for a grant. And we always inform them, well, you actually have to have a viable business in place first. But it doesn't matter if it's a startup that's a week old or a couple days old. If you've got all that information, your tax ID, your DUNS, and everything's in place, that's fine. You're eligible for the program.
Mark?
So Scott, you implied it on a number of occasions, but you never actually made it explicitly clear until right now that it's a company that's applying for these grants. So even if it's a company that's spun out of the university from a faculty member's lab, it is the company that's applying for the grant. And the second thing is, just following on your last answer, my understanding was that the company needs to be incorporated and all this work with registration needs to be done to fund the grant, to accept the funding, but you don't have to have all that completed to submit the application. Is that correct?
Okay, so I'll start with the second part first. That's not correct. Grants.gov has changed their process. And so in order to submit an application, you have to do a couple things. You have to make sure all your registrations are in place, which includes the SAM registration, have your DUNS number, have your tax ID number for a small business. The other part of that too is we're going to require you to register with the Small Business Administration to verify that you are in fact a small business and capable of applying to the program. So you got to have all that in place first before you submit the application to us. The SBA or the Small Business Administration registration piece, you can submit to us without having that completed, but we're going to ask for that if you've missed that step. But the other ones, grants.gov won't allow an application to come to our program unless those pieces are done. So that has to happen. There was a slide that I covered, to go back to your first point, there was a slide where I covered, the requirements for a university professor to be working less than 50% at the university in order to be the lead PI at a company on a grant. That's where I was covering that this program's only for small businesses. It's not for universities to apply for. However, universities can participate in the program as contracts, as subcontracts and or consultants.
We have 2 more questions, actually. Go ahead.
Okay, so just one follow-up on what you just mentioned, Scott, which is this is a program that is meant for companies to apply. So it means that a university consultant does not have to be on, is not required on the application, right? Or is it required to have somebody from the university on the application?
I'm sorry, Misty, maybe you could say the question.
So I think in some, is it required to have a university on the application?
No, we fund companies all the time that don't have any engagement with the university. You can go all kinds of different ways here, but I would say over 50% of our grants that we give out to small business have some affiliation with the university. It's a nice thing under the program because there's a lot of collaboration being done, and we like to see that. but you don't have to do that if you choose to. We have several companies that don't work with any universities.
Just to make it clear, so let's say some concept or technology has multiple applications for different agencies, like NHI, DOIs, and all that. Is it possible for a company using the same technology get two different phase one funding from two different agencies?
The answer to that is no. If the technology that if you're submitting duplicate proposals or applications to, let's say, us, and you want to send one to NSF, you have to tell us in the application that you've done that you also sent the application to another agency. If your project is selected for funding at USDA and we see that you've submitted it to NSF, we'll contact NSF and we're going to ask them, have you reviewed the proposal? And if they say yes, we'll ask them for a determination. If they say, yeah, we want to fund it, then we're going to come back to you as the PI and say, you need to make a decision. Which agency do you want to work with? And then we'll, if you say, okay, I want to go with USDA, then NSF would withdraw your proposal from their review. Now, there's nothing that says that if you have very differing technologies at your company and you want to submit applications to multiple, let's say you have a technology that deals with drones for crops, and you want to use that, you want to submit that to USDA, but you have the drone technology, but you're going to use it for monitoring troop movements for the military. Same platform, but very different outcomes of the technology. So that's okay. You could submit it to the two separate agencies and get funding for both. But it's when their duplicate technologies are very, it's the same thing, that's where the problems start arising, and that's when you can only select one agency.
Can a 501c3 incorporation apply for an SBIR?
Nonprofits are not eligible. So it has to be a small business, a for-profit business that can apply.
So for the peer review, if you have a proposal that is disruptive to the industry and you have academia and companies that are funded by this industry, how do you deal with the potential conflict of interest?
Okay. So we typically, first of all of the peer reviewers have to sign a non-disclosure agreement with us. So they are bound under that agreement to not disclose anything outside of the panel. So even if they are kind of in the same area, and we see this a lot, like particularly in the precision ag area where we've got drones. I like drones, they're kind of cool, so I use that as a lot of examples. But we have a lot of people that are submitting proposals on drones, and we have a lot of experts that are coming in and and providing us reviews in the drone area. They all sign non-disclosure agreements, and they are not allowed to discuss, use any information, or discuss the proprietary information outside of the panel. And we find that typically we haven't had any problems with that having an issue. Now, where we do run into conflicts of interest is, let's say we've got a panelist who served as a postdoc under a certain person, or they've jointly published together, or they worked on a project together that ultimately, that's where the project led to, is this type of technology. We identify those conflicts of interest very early on, and we'll try to not use them as panelists. Occasionally a conflict of interest will arise in the panel process, and then at that point we ask them to recuse themselves from the review of that proposal. And we've even, at some stages, we've asked people to leave the room and not be present during the discussion of that proposal. So we have ways of dealing with it based on how we learn of the conflicts of interest under the different processes. But for the most part, it's not a big issue. We find a lot of the industry folks that come in, they're not so much interested in the technical aspects of the proposal. They're mainly there providing us with feedback on the potential for commercialization and whether they're actually going to be able to make it into a market. And that is helpful at times, from that perspective.
All right, thanks, Scott. Very last question. Will you make these slides available to us, and can we share them on our website?
Absolutely. What I'll do is I'm gonna jet off here to catch a bus home. But if I email them to you tomorrow morning, would that work?
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Scott, for coming, and we appreciate your help on this topic, and hopefully we'll be talking to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.